Hello, good morning, everyone. So today's topic is, I'm going to hope that it's going to be of interest to you. It is of interest to me. So basically what we're trying to do here is kind of show you how sustainability and environmental design could actually drive design and influence it and also be a key driver in innovation. So without further ado, let's start with, hold on, other way around. Let's start with the definition of influence. What is it to influence something? It is basically to have the capacity to affect an individual, an entity, an organization, a character, whatever, or it's the act of the effect itself. So what does that mean towards the construction industry? We need to define what are the factors that actually influence design. So the first and foremost, of course, is the cost. Everybody's going to come and say, whenever I decide on a project, the first key factor is the budget, correct? So that contributes around 40% of the design decisions and the construction decisions. Next is the design brief, and that is kind of built up from a business case, a feasibility model that comes up to a drive from a developer or from the owner to a certain list of criteria that they want. And that, of course, constitutes around 30% of the design decisions because we are kind of restricted to that brief. Then comes the designer's creativity and imagination. So as architects, as designers, interior designers, whatever, we try to at least have a special touch when it comes to our design. And that constitutes, of course, around 25% influence, leaving us with a new joiner, which is sustainability and environmental decisions, constituting to the remainder 5%. And because this is just a new thing, it's a new trend, although I might debate that, it is actually quite a sad truth. And why is it a sad truth? Because we are driven in design by wrong practices, beliefs, misunderstandings, mishaps towards sustainability. The first one is the typical scenario or conventional practice is that you start designing and then you kind of post-rationalize, or you're trying to explain how sustainability has been incorporated into your project. And that is just probably to meet some certain government code or whatsoever. It's not actually an integrative process. And then there is the idea that if I am going to be putting sustainability at the forefront, then that would mean that I'm going to just shoot up my costs. And of course, as we saw previously, budget is the main contributor. So that is also a wrong belief, and you'll see how that is in the next slides. Next comes that it has no financial benefits. So as an owner, as a developer, they come and say, but why is it that I need to have sustainability? It's not like, I'm going to have any returns on my investments if I am going to be going down that road. Yes, there are the environmental contributors, there's a social element to it, etc., but what is it in it for me? And then some claim that, okay, you know what, fine, no return on investment, but this is quite an opportunity for a competitive benchmarking, or at least, trying to understand that guy next door has a certain certification and I want to outperform them. So it comes as part of their branding and marketing purposes. The next are suppliers. And unfortunately, when you go to suppliers these days and you try to get certain information, they might say that, this information is not currently available, or those environmental, attributes, we can give it to you, but it requires, a premium or like a certain, premium cost to that product, or it requires some testing, which we won't do unless we actually get awarded. So there's a lack of transparency. And then comes what I've witnessed over a vast years of experience is that there is a lack of understanding of what sustainability is actually all about. So if I asked randomly around people, and I'm sure a lot of you might actually agree with what's written here. To some, sustainability is like a label, right? It's just a certification, a plaque on the wall, or it's a checklist that they just have to tick, tick, tick the box to meet certain governmental codes. Or some might tell you, you know what, no, it's just a trend. We are just trying to, brainwash people, or what they call it as green brainwashing, that there is no substance to it. And then others might say, you know what, it's just a matter of managing waste on site, just procuring some environmentally friendly products, and that's it, right? We're good to go. Others might have heard of, carbon reductions or the decarbonization, which is something that is of a hot topic these days, but without actually understanding what is it actually all about. And then, of course, last but not least, it's just, we're just trying to do this because we're just trying to get a permit, or we're just trying to hand over a project, without actually understanding the meanings behind those codes and regulations and why are they actually there. And that is unfortunately why a lot of executives, from developers, owners, consultants, contractors, what it may be, actually engage with sustainability as a corporate social responsibility act. So it's an optional thing to them, or what you might hear now, which is also another hot topic, which is the environmental social governance and GRI reporting and the like. But it's actually completely divorced from the business objective or from the design, the core design element. It's a merely nice to have feature. It is not something that is embedded as part of a culture, or it's an act. It's completely divorced from that. And that is why it's quite sad. So let's take a moment just to try to at least attempt to understand the actual true meaning of sustainability, at least what it means to me, because it has different meanings to different people. So simply put, it's designing and operating with minimal negative impact on the environment. So that is like a very broad definition. If I'm going to give that to, a merely new graduate, probably this is a definition that can come out of the books. But what does it actually mean? So impact, just pretty much like influence, is to have that, effect on something. And in this case, the effect is on the environment. So we are actually taking a step back. What we are doing today, any action, any decision, is linked up into a chain reaction. And that is what we do when we are designing. Every decision that constitutes, a line on our drawing, a material selection, a finish, etc., has a ripple of effect on the environment. As basic as it could be good, it could be bad for the environment, and not just the environment. By environment, we talk about us, humans, the species of this planet, the resources within the planet. So let's take an example of, how designing could actually contribute to that. When we talk about the basic function of design, we're talking about, the very first thing that we do. We look at the building form, its orientation, its massing. This is the very first step as designers, right? There is the conventional design practice, which is, an architect comes, they start looking at the site, the topography, etc. They start doing, some massing, they play around, versus that which is right now a bit more trending, which is a climatic responsive design. What is the difference, and why is it really important for us to shift towards a climatic responsive design from the get-go? Because the higher, the surface area that is exposed to sunlight, for example, when we are designing, the higher the heat on the surface, which means that there are higher heat gains that is being absorbed by that building or that community, right? And the higher the heat gain, the higher the cooling demands, so the larger the equipments that you need to have. And then, of course, as an end user, the more air conditioning that you would rely on, because if you did not size it correctly, how many of you have walked into a room saying, my God, it is boiling in here, although the AC is working, right? And on the other hand, vice versa, if we minimize the heat gain, or if we treat that heat gain, we might go into a more comfortable level. So that all comes back to the first notion of designing, the basic form and orientation. But you see, it doesn't end within the building. And this is what, as designers, we don't see. is that we just design just merely because we're trying to meet the brief, but we don't look at the larger picture. So let's take a step back. If we do have higher surface heat gains on the buildings, on the infrastructure, that means that there is a higher urban scale temperature. All right? We are all part of an urban fabric, especially in metropolitan cities. With the higher increase of urban scale temperature, that means that the higher the scale, the higher the level of discomfort of the population, be it at a site level, be it on a community, on a city, or even on a country level, because it all kind of adds up. So imagine if you are just walking into an open sauna, more or less, because of the amount of exposure on the surface levels. And that is what is actually happening these days. Because of the high level of exposed or unstudied or unconscious decisions when it comes to our infrastructure, there is a constitute of a high rise of temperatures, which eventually raises the ozone depletion and global warming, and hence what we are now facing with all the climate change. So see, it all went back to your decision on how are you actually orienting the building and how are you treating the building envelope. But as designers, we don't really consider the bigger picture. We only look at, making it iconic, let it serve its function on a site-based level. So instead, what can we do in this scenario? We start looking at, as we said, climate-responsive design. We study the microclimate. We understand the surrounding. We understand the nature of that surface that we are designing for. What can we do to make it better? How can we challenge ourselves to actually reduce the heat gain, reduce climate attributes such as carbon, temperature, and not just that, but resources in general, right? And we start, looking at ideas, like for example, rather than keeping an area of high exposed surface, utilize that, especially in this part of the world, you can use renewables for clean energy and reap on the opportunities that the climate has to serve towards a positive change. Another example is concrete. So now we looked at the form, and so now let's look at when we are trying to look at materials that we are trying to specify. Now, concrete is a very, very popular building material. Everybody uses concrete, right? So let's try to understand, is concrete a good thing or a bad thing for us? Its composition, cement, water, and aggregate. Quite simple. But while cement only makes up 10% of concrete, around 80% of its carbon emission is linked to its production. So a lot of its emission comes from the production. As a rule of thumb, 1 kilogram of carbon is associated with 1 kilogram of cement. And why is that? Because cement, or the concrete in general, it requires a lot of limestone in the process. So limestone is itself, as a standalone resource, needs to be heated at very extreme temperatures for it to be utilized within the cement production. And that kind of drives up even the carbon even higher because of the embodied energy that comes with the fossil fuel burning at that high temperature. But it doesn't really end there. You see, when we are choosing concrete, we are thereby choosing all of its byproducts. So, for example, we need to ask ourselves, limestone, it's a natural resource, but how much of it is actually left in reserve? Does anybody in this room has an answer to that, if I may ask? Probably not. I don't know. So I don't expect you either to know, but I did do my research and we have plenty of limestone. We don't foresee it running out despite the high demand. But see, that concept goes towards other products as well, right? Because other materials are made up from different natural resources and those are actually running out. And we need to be more conscious about it. Another question that we want to ask as well when we are actually doing whether concrete or any other material is that where are we actually getting the aggregates from? What is our source, right? Is there plenty of it left out there? The transportation part of it to and from the facility of, between the production to the actually end site. Because all of that also contributes to the environment by carbon, energy, or other, of course, indicators like, ozone acidification, and I'm not going to bore you with all of the other, detailed terminologies. But you see, concrete, unlike a lot of materials, is not actually all that bad, and that is why we are still using it on a daily basis. And why is it not bad? Because similar to trees, concrete has the ability to absorb around 30 to 50% of carbon from the atmosphere, equating to around that 30 to 50% of its cement production. So it kind of balances the books, right? But at the same time, it's tricky because if we don't do something about it, it will still, rise up our carbon and thereby associating to global warming. But what do we get by understanding that carbon, and embodied energy actually tell us from whether it's concrete or otherwise? All right, so in this case, concrete, we could understand that it is one of the highest embodied carbon and energy materials to use. And as a main contributor to overall climate change, it actually rises up the temperatures, which means that we will end up in extreme, intolerable conditions if we are going to just keep using it without actual responsibility. So we need to talk about alternatives, or we need to innovate when it comes to the cement production or the concrete production in general. And if we still have to use it, then we need to just use it wisely, just like when it comes to our diet or whatever. There needs to be a balance. So there has been innovations, of course, with concrete, because this is one of the main construction materials out there. Some producers are actually now going to, instead of fossil fuel-based production, they're actually using other alternative sources, like plant-based sources or bio-based sources. Others, like for example, this company, Celera, they actually have created or innovated a concrete that absorbs back around 50% of the carbon from the cement production. So cement as itself, or the concrete as itself, kind of knocks out 30 to 50%, and they were able to get that byproduct of the waste and actually, basically develop it. So the carbon or the concrete that they are doing is more or less carbon neutral, because they are offsetting twice its production at the moment, considering, the pre and post after effect. Other manufacturers, and this is more commonly used, especially in this part of the region, and it's actually part of the government legislation, is to actually use SMEs, which is supplementary cementitious materials, such as fly ash or any other materials. And the reason why we use that is that we are trying to steer away from limestone in the production. So this becomes, or it reduces the carbon footprint just by increasing the amount of fly ash or any other alternative within the cement composition. So going back to our definition of understanding that every action has a chain reaction, gives us an understanding of the environmental properties of those elements, whether it is during design, construction, or operation. And then we try to eliminate those impacts step by step through sourcing, transporting, manufacturing, the entire building life cycle, which starts from the design, selecting of products, all the way to construction, and then operations, of course, and its end use or its disposal. And this model over here is what is known as a whole building life cycle, which is something that is right now also trending, and it's actually being demanded that all developers or consultants actually start looking into it. And what does that help us to do is that by understanding the life cycle of a material or the building, the performance, will help us in making conscious and responsible design decisions, which serves not only the planet, but also to the interest of the investors as well as the occupants, because we are trying to create a 360 degrees holistic environmental healthy safety measures towards our end product. And we need to also understand that it's beyond just the environmental properties. Understanding all of that would also help elongate or extend, whether it's the material or the building in itself, its durability, adaptability, and flexibility. And by understanding as well that everything that we do has a price tag. If you are going to decide on a certain finish, try to look at, the actual scale of the room, what is available in the market, so that we reduce waste before it actually gets generated down in the production streamline. So the price tag could be an environmental one, and it could be a monetary one. So when we're talking about costs, we need to understand that it's not just about money, as a monetary value, but there is actually another price tag that comes to it. So to me, sustainability is about deciding consciously and designing it right, factoring environmental, social, and monetary consequences, constructing responsibly, and operating sensibly. Because we could design, we could construct really good, and then it's down to the end user. If they do not operate correctly, it's all gone to waste. And thereby allowing resources and the built environment to last longer and to serve for many more generations. It is about solving today's problem. A lot of times, when you talk about sustainability, we're talking about linking it to the future, that we're trying to, create a better future for more generations. But actually taking a step back, it's actually solving us, it's helping us. Because the problem right now is what we are facing today with climate change and the like. So if we don't act today for our own sake, then obviously there is no tomorrow. So it's about solving it for us so that we can seed today for tomorrow. And there are plenty of benefits to sustainability and environmental design. It is actually a cost-saving measure, not a cost driver, because by doing or deciding or selecting sustainable and environmental products or going through the process correctly. You see, it's not just about products. It's a process. Sustainability is a process, not an end product, right? And by doing that, you're actually value engineering along the way, because you're trying to make conscious decisions along the way, be it for the design stage, construction, or operations. And of course, nobody would deny that it is actually a branding or a marketing tool for developers and owners, and it's part of, a whole global act. It actually serves as healthier, functional, habitable spaces, which are much in need for, and therefore increasing the demand would increase the revenues, everybody's happy. And at the same time, it costs less energy, water, and waste consumption, and therefore our utility bills or our impact on our own personal pockets actually goes down. It also merely helps with slowing of the resource depletion around the world, so it helps the planet to heal. There is less emissions, less heat, less pollution, therefore less carbon footprint and a better quality of life for all. So a quote here that I quite kind of take by the day, which is sustainability can't be like some sort of a moral sacrifice or a political dilemma, nor a philanthropical cause. It has to be a design challenge. And yes, it is a challenge. We should demand that sustainable practice is implemented. We shouldn't fear them or indulge in those wrong perceptions that I highlighted earlier. In fact, if you look at the studies now, sustainability is actually the key driver when it comes to the construction industry right now. Everybody's trying to beat that race, to try to create better products, better chains, better buildings, right? So let's challenge ourselves. Let's take that up, because it's all going to be part of global commitments. And why do you think there are global commitments and everything? I'm sure everybody's been hearing about sustainability as a hot topic, construction or otherwise, because we need a place to live. And while we may not understand that at first, or at least as notions, as designers, let me show you here a graph from the latest IPCC report, which is the Intergovernmental Climate Change Organization. All those areas in red are marked as or deemed unsuitable to be habitable in the next few years. And you see, our region is just one of the worst. So if we don't act today as designers, as contractors, as developers, or what may be, just as individuals, merely as individuals, there isn't going to be a place for us to live. And even if you might say, okay, you know what, I'll just move towards those green countries. Eventually, it's a chain reaction. And we're going to end up with a planet that is just unsustainable for us to even continue our day-to-day functions. Forget about just high rise in temperatures. We're talking about resources. We're talking about, comfort levels. We're talking about, just one of those applicable movies that you see. We're heading down that road, and we need to step up now. The governments have done that, so it's now down to us. And how did the governments do it? First, of course, you've heard, of course, of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals, already known. It's part of the Vision 2030, and 149 countries have committed to it. And then there's, of course, another major one, which is the Paris Agreement, that is trying to limit the emissions or the global warming, or at least the temperatures around the world, to below 2 degrees, but preferably, of course, at 1.5 degrees. And that is the race that everybody is trying to do it. And 198 governments have committed to it. And while we are on that path, it is estimated that it needs another 20, 30, if not 50 years for us to get down to that level. So if we don't act now, and that is estimating that we are acting now. So if we don't act now, it's just going to delay that process. And that red zone is just going to get worse and worse and worse. The UAE, given that we're part of that red region, have actually stepped up, and they are part of the governments that have signed up to that. So part of the Vision 2030, there is they're addressing different topics such as climate change, managing the climate impact, creating clean air, limiting noise pollution, managing and conserving water resources, and conserving biodiversity and increasing, actually, and you can see that, there are a lot of requirements now for greening of spacing, because we're trying to, cut back on that carbon through that and encourage, of course, biodiversity. And of course, there's a severe investments in waste management. Not just we're talking about, construction, but we're talking about the flow process itself, whether it be, from the fashion industry, agriculture, whatsoever. And down to the Vision 2050 in alignment with the Paris Agreement, where they're trying to reach net zero emissions. Saudi Arabia, another major key player in this region, have also committed to this. So by Vision 2030, they are announcing that sustainability is actually at the heart of everything they do. So they're trying to embed it as a core, as part of their core practices, right? So it goes from investments all the way down to infrastructures and beyond. And with an aim to also reach net zero emissions, but by 2060. And what does that mean for all of us sitting here or outside? It means that we are going to have to start reporting. So as individuals, as corporates, as whatsoever, we need to actually report on our carbon emissions, our transport, etc. And of course, as suppliers, you need to, engage with, certain studies to actually prove how much is, your product contributing to the environment. The construction industry by itself is, it accounts for around 40% of the global emission, and that is quite a big chunk. So what do we do? First, with the design, we start looking at, design decisions from day one, trying to cut down emissions as we go step by step. Use it as a tool, as a design tool. Don't post-rationalize it. Use it as a design tool. Similarly, during construction, you also calculate your carbon footprint, and you try to minimize by actually, procuring from more sustainable sources or from areas, that are closer to the region. Suppliers, they need to step up and start, publishing and be more transparent with their products. So there's an environmental product declaration that they need to bring on board. Sustainable operations, be it at, a developer scale, as well as us as users or end users. And of course, there's the notion of promoting for a circular economy, which is steps away from that linear, extract, use, and then just burn it through the landfill, but rather you're reusing it within the project site itself. And therefore, I believe there is a high need for innovation in design, in construction, in production and operation, revisiting that influence chart and replacing the normal practice with more conscious ones, and we need to step up our reporting. So going back to our initial chart, cost, in my opinion, should go down to 30%. The design brief should start incorporating or demanding better sustainable practices as a process, not just as an end result, right? And that should constitute around 20%. The designer's creativity and imagination, linking it up also with sustainable decisions, would constitute around 20%, and leaving sustainability and environmental decisions along with life cycle assessment at 30%. So it's a 50-50 split. What is important as a business case is also important on a design base. And we can do that through different measures. So we could either choose to, we can go with alternative materials with lower carbon footprint, using more natural materials, reusing them, recycling them, So I won't bore you with that, but it's all part of that challenge of ask yourself, how can I make this better? There are case studies out there who are attempting, innovations at all levels. First and foremost, we will hear about energy positive buildings. So we're going not just as near zero energy buildings, but actually positive buildings. This building here, which is a powerhouse in Norway, is producing twice the level of energy that it requires. And thereby, it doesn't just self-operate, it actually plugs back to the environment, to the neighborhood. And not just adjacent buildings, they're actually powering up the city's buses, taxis, vehicles, so anything that is electrical. So just from one building, they stepped all the way up. There are others where we're talking about, in this project, they have over 75,000 plants offsetting 1,000 tons of carbon. So we need to look at how can buildings through greenscaping can actually contribute in reducing emissions. Another proposal by a startup in GeoShip, they actually use bioceramic domes. So instead of using concrete, they've created their own material from waste products, and thereby, again, promoting circular economy and the like. Of course, this goes back to the same concept, but instead of on a horizontal level, we also can greenscape on green walls. And there's another bistro that has a concept that used 100% of its building interior as 100% recyclables from the packaging that comes to that restaurant. And in fact, even the utensils, the furniture, the tables, everything, 100% recyclable. And the food concept goes beyond that with a zero waste concept. So there is no packaging in this restaurant, and you order to your, straight to your mouth, no waste whatsoever. And anything that is generated is then reused. And of course, lastly, there is also the new concept of floating homes, schools, etc. And the idea here is to have them off the grid. So they are solar powered, they filter and store their water so they can operate as standalones, especially in areas where they're more prone to floods. So developers should encourage those new ideas. We need to step out of our shell, of our bubble of conventional practice, and we need to start looking at how can we actually use sustainability as a design tool rather than just merely an add-on feature. And together, let's hope that we can innovate to create a better tomorrow. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I thank you so much, and I hope you found it useful. And I'll take any questions.
Hi. So you said the SDG is supported by 149 countries and the Paris Agreement by 198 countries.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is there a conflict between the Paris Agreement goals and the SDG goals that lesser number of countries are supporting it?
It's part of global commitments. You see, there is, if you're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Agreement in general, it comes with a lot of investments towards the infrastructure, towards the the economy as a whole, the fabric of that country, and not all countries are able to actually meet all of those goals. So those that took it upon themselves and they're challenging themselves to actually go that extra notch. And these are the ones that kind of signed up. That doesn't mean that the other countries are laying back, but it's just that, at least in my own opinion, I feel like they can contribute with 1, 2, and 3, but they can't, meet everything, or at least it's going to take them longer. So they don't want to put themselves at the forefront where they're going to be held accountable, because as I told you, they need to start reporting. There's an audit, for example, for the Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Agreement, for the fact they are going to start sending out committees, and they're going to start auditing based on whatever the country is reporting. So it's not just merely that you're drafting up something and you're sending it and that's it. No, they're actually going to come back and check to validate whether what you have done is right or wrong. And I don't think in that perspective, a lot of countries will be able to actually get that full mark, right? But it's a step forward. And I'm hoping that, I mean, yes, not all countries are there, but eventually I believe it's just paving the way for those other, less developed countries or those that, still need more time for them to come on board. But I believe eventually everybody will come on board. There's a question down there. I hope I answered your question, though.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the very lovely presentation. My name is Seema Sutradhar. I'm the founder of SEAM, Sustainability Through Engagement, Empowerment and Mobilization.
Hello.
You have rightly addressed the point that construction sector has 40% of the carbon footprint of the world.
The global emissions.
Global. So the main factors which contribute towards carbon in this sector, as you said, cement, steel. In India, I'm keen to understand, like, where is the progress? Are they, at what stage they are now when we are talking about green steel or carbon neutral cement? So if you can just throw some light.
For that company in particular, I'm not sure at what stage, but I know that they are operating and they are producing, their cement product. I'm just not sure how much of it is being actually used. I cannot talk on behalf of a company, but there are several innovations, not just them, but and other suppliers as well and key chains that actually are trying to innovate through better cement production.
So you mean to say there are smaller players who are innovating and coming up with
Yes.
better products rather than the existing big market shareholders?
Not necessarily, but the startups are trying to take sustainability as a key driver, right? Mm-hmm. Like you cannot teach an old dog all the new habits, right?
Yes.
So, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that the big players are ignoring it because they also step up,
yeah,
right?
it's more challenging for them.
Exactly. It is more challenging for them than just a startup. So they are working around it. And of course, as we said, there are, especially here in this region, we are using a lot of fly ash, etc. And these help in reducing the carbon footprint in general of concrete. So, but others are actually trying to innovate through, understanding the waistline of it and how can they bring it back so that they can innovate better products.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Sorry, yes.
Time.
Okay.
If you guys have more questions, you can chase her afterwards and she'll be happy to help
Yeah,
you guys.
I'm available, I'm around, so you can just
Yeah.
tag along. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day.